The purpose of money. Money is more than paper or coins. It represents economic value. A country's goods, services, and labor should be reflected in every bill or coin. An ideal money supply matches a nation's production of food, vehicles, housing, technology, and other resources. The country doesn't get richer by printing more money. It just means more money is chasing the same items. Therefore, each currency loses purchasing power. Suppose a village produces 100 loaves of bread daily and has $100. Each loaf costs $1. If the government doubles money supply to $200, but the bakery only manufactures 100 loaves, it will boost prices to $2 per loaf. Only the price has changed, not the bread's quality or amount. Inflation. Inflation happens when the overall prices of goods and services rise over time, and it directly impacts what your money can buy. When governments print money faster than the economy can produce goods and services, people suddenly have more cash to spend, but the supply of products hasn't grown. Businesses respond by raising prices because demand outpaces supply. The higher the inflation, the less each dollar is worth. Over time, this erodes people's purchasing power. A $100 bill today may only buy $90 worth of goods next year if inflation is high. Inflation also has a ripple effect. It increases the cost of living, makes everyday essentials more expensive, and can lead to social unrest if wages don't keep up. In the United States during the late 1970s, inflation surged into double digits, meaning prices rose more than 10% per year. This forced the Federal Reserve to take drastic action by raising interest rates to record highs to slow spending and restore stability. Hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is inflation on steroids. It's when prices rise so quickly and uncontrollably that the currency becomes almost worthless. This typically happens when governments rely heavily on printing money to pay debts, fund wars, or support failing economies. Zimbabwe in 2008 is one of the most extreme examples in modern history. The country printed so much money that inflation reached 79.6 billion percent per month. Prices doubled every few hours, and people carried stacks of banknotes in wheelbarrows just to buy basic groceries. In Weimar, Germany during the early 1920s, the government printed money to pay World War I reparations, and prices spiraled so fast that workers were paid twice a day to spend their wages before they lost value. In both cases, printing money didn't solve the problem. It destroyed trust in the currency and collapsed the economy. Supply and demand of currency. The value of a country's currency is determined by the same supply and demand principles that apply to goods in a market. When the supply of money increases dramatically, but demand remains the same or falls, the value of that money declines. On the international stage, currencies are traded based on investor confidence. If foreign investors believe a country is printing money recklessly, they may sell off that currency, causing its value to plummet. This has real consequences. A weaker currency makes imports more expensive, meaning products like oil, cars, medicine, and electronics cost more. If a country depends on imported goods, printing money can trigger a rapid rise in the cost of living. The role of central banks. Central banks, like the Federal Reserve in the US, the European Central Bank in Europe, and the Bank of England in the UK, are responsible for managing a country's money supply. They print money carefully and strategically, based on economic indicators such as growth rates, unemployment, and inflation. Their role is to maintain stability, not just to increase the amount of money. Printing large amounts recklessly bypasses these safeguards and can destabilize the economy. Central banks also use tools like interest rate adjustments, open market operations, and bank reserve requirements to influence how much money is circulating. This is why when they do increase the money supply, it's usually balanced with other measures to prevent inflation from spiraling out of control. International trade impact. In a global economy, no country is completely self-sufficient. Nations buy and sell goods and services across borders, and the strength of their currency affects the prices they pay. If a country prints too much money and its currency weakens, imports become more expensive. This can be devastating for countries that rely heavily on imported essentials like oil, medicine, or food. For example, If a nation's currency loses half its value, importing fuel from abroad could cost twice as much in local money. This higher cost of imports then trickles down to consumers, raising the prices of almost everything, since transportation and manufacturing often depend on imported resources. Investor and public confidence. The strength of a currency relies heavily on trust. If citizens and investors believe the government will print money recklessly, they may rush to spend their local currency before it loses value, or they might convert it into foreign currency, gold, or real estate. This sudden lack of confidence can accelerate inflation, creating a vicious cycle where the currency devalues faster and faster. Once this cycle begins, it's extremely difficult to restore trust without drastic economic measures. Countries that have faced this problem often need international loans, currency reforms, or even the introduction of an entirely new currency to stabilize the situation. The risk of the wage price spiral. A wage price spiral occurs when inflation pushes workers to demand higher wages, and employers, in turn, raise prices to cover the increased payroll costs. This cycle can be triggered and worsened by excessive money printing. For instance, if prices rise because there's too much money in circulation, workers will understandably want more pay to keep up with the cost of living. But when companies raise wages, they also raise prices to maintain profits, and the inflation cycle accelerates. If money printing continues during this process, the spiral becomes even harder to control, often leading to a tipping point where the economy overheats. Impact on savings and investments. When inflation is high due to money printing, the value of savings erodes rapidly. People who have worked for years to build financial security can see their wealth vanish in months. For example, $10,000 in savings that could buy a car today might not even be enough for a bicycle during severe inflation. Investments also suffer because uncertainty discourages both local and foreign investors from putting money into businesses or government projects. Without investment, economic growth slows, unemployment rises, and living standards decline. This lack of long-term capital is one reason why countries that experience high inflation often struggle to recover quickly. Historical lessons. History is filled with examples of nations learning the hard way that printing more money doesn't solve economic problems. Apart from Zimbabwe and Weimar Germany, Venezuela in the 2010s printed huge amounts of money to cover public spending, leading to hyperinflation so severe that ordinary items cost millions of bolivars. Argentina has faced repeated cycles of currency collapse and inflation because of heavy reliance on money printing instead of structural economic reforms. These cases show that while printing money might seem like a quick fix, it's almost always followed by long-term economic pain. Modern alternatives to printing. Instead of flooding the economy with money, governments can use targeted fiscal policies to stimulate growth. These include investing in infrastructure, providing tax incentives to businesses, offering low-interest loans, or funding innovation and education. Such measures encourage actual production, job creation, and sustainable growth. In times of crisis, like during the COVID-19 pandemic, some countries did increase money supply, but it was paired with measures to keep inflation manageable, such as temporary spending programs and controlled interest rate changes. Printing money without such controls, however, would have caused inflation to spiral out of control.